We have always terrified ourselves with the binary of the afterlife: heaven or hell, 0 or 1, existence or non-existence. But nature, as we understand it through the lens of rigorous observation, rarely deals in absolutes. Nature loves the gradient. It loves the phase transition. Think of water turning to ice. It doesn't happen instantly. There is a slurry, a slush, a moment where the substance is neither liquid nor solid. If we apply this principle to the cessation of human consciousness, we inevitably stumble upon a scientific framework for what theology has historically called purgatory. But if purgatory exists, it is not a waiting room of clouds and spirits. It is a terrifying necessity of biology and relativistic physics. To understand it, we must first look inward, at the architecture of the dying mind. Because the first layer of purgatory is likely not a place you go to, but a time loop you get trapped in. Consider the phenomenon of time dilation, not just in the cosmos, but within the neural circuitry of the human brain. We know from studies on near-death experiences and high-dose psychedelic research that the subjective perception of time is completely decoupled from the objective passage of time on a clock. When you dream, a narrative that feels like it spans hours can physically occur during a few minutes of REM sleep. The brain has the ability to accelerate its processing speed relative to the sensory input it receives, effectively stretching a second into a minute, or a minute into an hour. Now, extrapolate this to the moment of death. When the heart stops, the brain does not immediately shut down. We used to think it did, but recent EEG studies on dying patients have shown a massive, hypersynchronized surge of gamma wave activity in the temporal lobes, the region responsible for memory and complex narrative construction, lasting for minutes after clinical death. This is the final dump. The brain, sensing catastrophic oxygen deprivation, unspools its entire neural archive in a desperate attempt to find a solution to its imminent destruction. In these final minutes of objective time, if the ratio of subjective time dilation creates a logarithmic curve, the dying consciousness could theoretically experience a duration that feels like decades, centuries, or even a subjective eternity. This is the life review, reported by survivors, but stripped of its mysticism, it is a data crash. Purgatory, in this biological model, is a simulation running on the fading electricity of your own decaying neurons. You are trapped in the cathedral of your own memory. And here is where the purification aspect of purgatory gains a mechanism. In this state, your conscious filters are gone. The ego, the part of you that justifies your mistakes, that ignores your guilt, that represses your trauma, dissolves. You are left with the raw data of your actions. You would be forced to reprocess every interaction, every regret, and every joy with brutal, unbuffered clarity. It wouldn't be a judgment by a deity. It would be a judgment by your own connectome. You would be trapped in a feedback loop of your own making, processing the data of your life until the entropy of your brain finally reaches maximum and the lights truly go out. To the outside observer, you died at 12:01. To you, you might have spent 1,000 years walking through the corridors of your own history, sorting the files, cleaning the slate. That is the biological definition of purgatory. A final, subjective epic of self-correction before the system formats the drive. But biology is small. It is a local phenomenon. If we want to find a purgatory that exists independently of the skull, a physical place where souls, or rather information patterns, are caught in suspension, we have to look at the fabric of space-time itself. We have to talk about the event horizon. In general relativity, as you approach a black hole, the gravitational pull becomes so immense that it warps time. To an outside observer, if you were to fall into a black hole, you would never actually cross the threshold. You would appear to slow down, dimmer and dimmer, redshifting into infinity, effectively frozen in time forever on the surface of the void. Now, consider the holographic principle. This is a leading theory in string theory, which suggests that the three-dimensional reality we experience is actually a projection of two-dimensional information stored on a distant cosmological horizon. If this is true, then we are all merely data, information. And in physics, there is a strict rule: information cannot be destroyed. This is the unitary principle. So, when the biological vessel breaks, where does the data go? It cannot vanish. It must be conserved. It is entirely plausible that there exists a data sink, or a buffer zone, in the universe, a region of space-time where the entropy is lower, where the information that constituted you is stored before it is recycled into the cosmic background radiation. Imagine Purgatory not as a waiting room, but as a server cache. When a computer file is deleted, it isn't wiped from the magnetic disk immediately. The pointer is just removed. The data sits there, ghost-like, waiting to be overwritten. If the universe recycles consciousness or energy, there must be a transitional state, a thermodynamic purgatory, where high-complexity structures, us, are broken down into low-complexity noise. This state would be a realm of maximum disorder increasing from order. It would be a place of fragmentation. If you were conscious in this state, you wouldn't feel pain, but you would feel a terrifying loss of cohesion. You would feel yourself scattering. The cleansing fire of religious texts could be interpreted as the second law of thermodynamics, tearing apart the ordered bonds of your identity, bit by bit, atom by atom, returning you to the baseline energy of the cosmos. It is a purification through dissolution. You are being scrubbed of your complexity so that your atoms can be used to make stars, or dust, or other people. Purgatory is the recycling center of the universe, and the process of being taken apart, while necessary, might be the most harrowing experience a consciousness can endure. We must now descend from the macrocosm of black holes to the microcosm of quantum mechanics, because it is here, in the subatomic grain of reality, that the most compelling scientific argument for a middle state exists. In classical physics, an object is either here or there. You are either alive or dead. But in quantum mechanics, we encounter the principle of superposition. Before a particle is observed or interacts with its environment, it exists in all possible states simultaneously. It is a wave of pure potentiality. If we apply this to the moment of death, we stumble upon a state of existence that is mathematically identical to purgatory, the coherence buffer. Imagine the precise nanosecond of your death. Your biological systems fail. The coherence that binds your atoms into a thinking machine begins to unravel. But quantum mechanics suggests that the collapse of the wave function is not always instantaneous. There is a theoretical transition period, a twilight zone of decoherence. In this interval, you are Schrödinger's cat. You are suspended between the state of being and non-being. You are a probability wave that hasn't crashed onto the shore yet. If consciousness is, as Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff suggest in their Orc-Or theory, a result of quantum vibrations within the microtubules of our brain neurons, then death is the release of this quantum information back into the Planck-scale geometry of space-time. But what if the release isn't clean? What if the information gets stuck? Purgatory, in this view, is a quantum smear. It is a state where your consciousness has decoupled from the biological hardware but hasn't yet dissipated into the universal vacuum. You are a radio signal without a receiver, echoing in the noise. In this state, time would have no meaning. Space would be non-local. You would exist everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, trapped in a superposition of every memory, every regret, and every hope you ever held, waiting for the universe to resolve the equation of your existence. But the horror deepens when we look at the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. This theory states that for every quantum interaction, the universe splits. Every outcome happens in a separate timeline. This gives rise to the concept of quantum immortality, which might be the most scientific description of hell or purgatory ever conceived. The theory posits that from your own subjective perspective, you can never experience your own cessation. Non-existence is, by definition, not an experience. Therefore, your consciousness will always slide into the timeline where you survive. Imagine you get into a fatal car crash. In 99.9% of the universes, you die. Your family mourns, your body is buried. But you are not in those universes. You are trapped in the 0.1% branch where you miraculously survived. You wake up in the hospital, broken, in pain, perhaps paralyzed, but conscious. Now, extend this to old age. Extend this to terminal illness. As the probability of your survival drops to infinitesimal levels, the universes you are forced to inhabit become increasingly improbable, strange, and agonizing. You become a statistical anomaly, a consciousness stranded in a reality that has to bend the laws of probability just to keep you aware. This is the asymptotic purgatory. You are effectively dead to the rest of the multiverse, but subjectively, you are trapped in a thinning branch of reality, forcing you to endure a life that should have ended. You are waiting for a release that mathematics won't grant you. You are watching the world around you become more alien, more hostile, because only in a truly chaotic and strange universe could a person in your condition survive. Purgatory is not a place of fire. It is the timeline of improbable survival. It is the waiting room where you sit, broken, watching the door that says death, but it's locked, and you are forced to live through the aftermath of your own end, over and over again. And what of the testing aspect of purgatory? The idea that we are judged? We can look to simulation theory for this. If our universe is a computed reality, a grand simulation run by a post-human or alien intelligence, then death is merely the termination of your avatar's code. But in software engineering, you rarely just delete complex code. You quarantine it. You put it in a sandbox. If your consciousness file contains errors, trauma, malevolence, unresolved data loops, which we call sin or guilt, the system cannot integrate you back into the source code. Merging corrupt code with the mainframe would crash the simulation. So, there must be a debugging environment, a holding server. This is purgatory, a diagnostic mode where the simulation replays your life, searching for bugs. It runs stress tests on your character. It puts you in scenarios to see if you have learned, if you can resolve your loops. If you fix the code, if you repent, if you let go, you are merged back into the whole. You ascend. If you cannot, if your code is fundamentally broken, you are permanently quarantined, hell, or deleted, non-existence. In this model, the ghosts people claim to see are just artifacts of data lingering in the buffer, waiting for the system administrator to decide their fate. We are not souls. We are executable files, and purgatory is the antivirus scan running deep in the background of the cosmic operating system, checking us for malware before we are allowed to upload. We must ultimately confront the physics of time itself, specifically the model known as eternalism, or the block universe. According to Einstein's special relativity, the distinction between past, present, and future is merely a stubbornly persistent illusion. There is no universal now sweeping across the cosmos. Physics suggests that time is a dimension just like space. It is a coordinate system. The year 1920 exists just as physically as the location New York exists. They are simply at different coordinates in the four-dimensional block of space-time. If this hypothesis is correct, then nothing ever truly ceases to exist. Your birth, your first heartbreak, your everyday routine, and your moment of death are all permanent fixtures in the crystal of reality. They are frozen there forever, like a fly in amber. In this terrifying context, purgatory is not a destination. Purgatory is the realization of recursion. If your consciousness is not a flowing stream, but a static geometric shape winding through the block of the universe, then death might simply be the needle lifting off the record. But the song remains on the vinyl. The grooves are still there. The theory of the eternal return, proposed by Nietzsche and toyed with by cosmologists like Henri Poincaré, suggests that given infinite time and finite matter, configurations must repeat. If the universe is cyclic, a big bang followed by a big crunch, oscillating forever, then the specific arrangement of atoms that creates you will inevitably reassemble. This leads to a scientific definition of purgatory that is far bleaker than any fire. The loop. You may be condemned by the laws of probability and infinite time to live this exact life, with every mistake, every pain, and every moment of doubt, over and over again, for eternity. There is no memory of the previous cycle, so you cannot change it. You are trapped in a deterministic cage of your own biography. Purgatory is the lack of new data. It is the perfect, hermetically sealed prison of identical repetition. You are not waiting to ascend. You are waiting for the cycle to break, but the physics of a bouncing cosmology suggests it never will. You are a skipping CD in the car stereo of the cosmos. But let's look at the connection between consciousness and entropy. The second law of thermodynamics states that entropy, disorder, always increases. Life is a struggle against entropy. We eat, we breathe, we think to maintain order, to keep the complex structure of our identity intact against the chaos. Death is the moment the dam breaks. It is the rapid equalization of your internal order with the external chaos. However, information theory suggests that forgetting is thermodynamic work. To erase a bit of information requires energy, Landauer's principle. When you die, your brain can no longer pay the energy cost to erase or organize memories. So what happens to the backlog? Purgatory could be the subjective experience of total recall without the ability to filter. Imagine experiencing every sensory input you ever ignored. The hum of the fridge, the texture of your socks, the background conversations in a crowd, all rushing back at once because the gatekeeper, the energy-expensive filter of the prefrontal cortex, has dissolved. You would be drowning in the raw noise of your own existence. This is the white static of the soul. It is a state of maximum informational density where meaning collapses under the weight of data. You aren't being punished, you are being saturated. You become everything you ever were, all at once, and the resulting cacophony is a state of being that is neither alive nor dead, but a screaming paralysis of absolute memory. And finally, we must touch upon the concept of biocentrism. If consciousness is not a byproduct of matter, but the fundamental force that creates matter, as proposed by theorists like Robert Lanza, then death is a change in frequency, not a termination of the signal. Radio waves do not die when you smash the radio. They are still there, permeating the room, carrying the music, but there is no machine to render them into sound. If the you is the signal and the body is the receiver, then purgatory is the state of being unrendered. You return to the potentiality field. In this field, you are entangled with every other consciousness that has ever existed, because separation is a physical illusion created by our bodies. Without the body to define me versus you, the barrier falls. Purgatory, then, is the traumatic shock of collective consciousness. It is the moment where the drop of water hits the ocean and screams because it is terrified of losing its shape. The suffering of the soul is simply the ego fighting to remain separate in a universe that demands unity. It is the friction of the individual resisting the absolute. We perceive it as a waiting room or a place of trial because our limited, singular minds cannot comprehend the magnitude of becoming the whole. We fight the assimilation. We cling to our names, our histories, our petty grievances. And that clinging, that desperate clawing to remain I in a sea of we, that is the very definition of purgatory. We must dig deeper into the neurology of absence to find the true geographic location of purgatory. It may not be in the stars, but in the phantom pain of the universe itself. Consider the medical phenomenon of the phantom limb. A soldier loses an arm, yet for decades he feels the itch on fingers that are rotting in a grave 10,000 miles away. The brain's cortical map, the homunculus, has not updated to reflect the loss of the physical territory. It continues to send signals to avoid, expecting a response and receiving only silence. This dissonance creates pain. Now, apply this to the phantom soul. If consciousness is the brain's internal model of the self, what happens when the entire body is amputated from the mind? Death is the ultimate amputation. The you that persists in those final moments of electrical twilight is a command center screaming into a dead microphone. Purgatory, in this neurological framework, is the paralysis of intent. It is the state of willing your hand to move, willing your voice to speak, and finding that the machinery of interaction has been severed. You are a ghost in your own machine, trapped in a state of sensory deprivation that is absolute. Isolation tanks on Earth can induce hallucinations and psychosis within hours. Imagine an isolation tank that lasts for an eternity, where the only sensory input is the feedback loop of your own panic. This is the waiting of purgatory, the agonizing delay between the impulse to live and the realization that the mechanism of life is broken. But let us move from the internal to the external, to the terrifying concept of mimetic purgatory. We often say you live on in the memories of others as a comfort. Scientifically, this is a curse. Richard Dawkins introduced the meme as a unit of cultural transmission, a virus of the mind. When you die, the complex pattern of information that is you is fragmented and distributed across the neural networks of everyone you ever knew. You become software running on other people's hardware. In this sense, purgatory is the slow, agonizing decay of your resolution. You exist as a high-fidelity simulation in the minds of your spouse or children, but as they age, as their neurons degrade, the you inside them corrupts. Your image becomes blurry. Your voice in their head changes pitch. You are being edited, rewritten, and compressed. you are trapped in the purgatory of the noosphere, the sphere of human thought. You are dependent on the biological batteries of the living to maintain your existence. This is a precarious, degrading state. The prayers for the dead found in every religion might simply be the living attempting to refresh the cache, to upload energy to the dying memes of their ancestors, to keep them from dissolving into digital noise. The moment the last person who knew you dies, you face the second death. Purgatory is that interval of centuries where you are slowly forgotten, a ghost becoming a myth becoming a footnote becoming nothing. Now, let's consider the dark sector. We know that baryonic matter, the stuff we can touch and see, makes up less than 5% of the universe. The rest is dark matter and dark energy. Physics tells us that these sectors do not interact with electromagnetism, light, but they do interact with gravity. Some theorists propose the existence of mirror matter, or a shadow biosphere, coexisting in the same space as us, invisible but massive. What if purgatory is a phase transition? Thermodynamics dictates that energy changes forms. When the electromagnetic bonds of your body fail, death, perhaps the organized energy of consciousness undergoes a symmetry breaking, shifting from the baryonic sector to the dark sector. You don't leave Earth. You don't go to heaven. You become dark matter. You are still standing in the room, but you are now invisible to light. You can see your grieving family, but your photons pass through them. You try to scream, but you cannot move air molecules. You are heavy, you have mass, you have gravity. You are a literal ghost, haunting the space-time curvature of your former home. This explains the presence people feel. It's not a spirit, it's a microgravitational anomaly. Purgatory is the condition of being a WIMP, weakly interacting massive particle. You are exiled to the shadow sector, forced to watch the world of light carry on without you, able to exert only the faintest gravitational tug on the reality you once owned. You are the invisible weight in the room. You are the cold spot where entropy is behaving strangely. You are trapped in the gravity well of your own life, unable to escape, unable to interact, simply waiting for the slow decay of your dark matter coherency. We must also confront the terrifying implications of the Boltzmann brain in a heat-death scenario. If the universe expands forever, eventually all stars will die. The universe will become a cold, dark void of maximum entropy. But quantum fluctuations never stop. Given infinite time, it is statistically certain that particles will randomly come together to form a functioning brain, complete with false memories of a life that never happened. This leads to the purgatory of the end times. You might be a Boltzmann brain floating in the deep freeze of the distant future, trillions of years after the sun has burned out. Your entire life, your childhood, your breakfast this morning, this video you are watching, is a hallucination being generated by a random quantum fluctuation in the void. You are alone in the dark, dreaming of a world of light. When the fluctuation destabilizes, you die, only to reform eons later to dream again. Purgatory is the eternal recurrence of momentary consciousness in an infinite graveyard. We are the sparks in the ash heap of the cosmos, igniting and extinguishing forever, dreaming of a past that turned to dust eons ago. We are not living a life, we are remembering a life that has been over for 1 billion years. And finally, consider the concept of time crystals. In 2012, Frank Wilczek proposed a state of matter that repeats in time, not just in space. If consciousness can exist in a time crystalline state, then purgatory is a locked temporal groove. Trauma creates strong neural pathways. It burns a groove into the substrate of the mind. If this imprint survives the biological substrate, you could be trapped in a time crystal of your worst moment. Not the whole life review, but the single point of highest emotional energy. The car crash, the heart attack, the betrayal, a 4D loop of pure intensity. You are a skipping record on the turntable of space-time, forever repeating the climax of your narrative, unable to move forward into the verse, unable to fade into the silence. You are a glitch in the temporal lattice, a repeating error message in the code of the universe. We must extend our gaze to the absolute limit of physical speed, the speed of light. In special relativity, we learn that information cannot travel faster than c. This means that your life, your image, and the electromagnetic heat signature of your body are radiating outwards from the Earth into the cosmos at 186,000 miles per second. You are an expanding sphere of information. This sphere is your past light cone. If an observer 60 light years away looks at Earth right now with a powerful enough telescope, they are watching you be born. In this strict physical sense, you never die. You simply propagate. But this propagation creates a form of purgatory known as the causal echo. Purgatory is the delay between the event and the observation. If you were to die, and your consciousness were to become untethered from the biological slow lane, shifting into a frame of reference traveling at the speed of light, time would stop. For a photon, 0 time passes between leaving a star and hitting your eye, even if the journey took 1 billion years. If the soul is photonic, if it is pure energy, then the moment of death is an instantaneous acceleration to light speed. From your perspective, the universe ends instantly. But from the perspective of the universe, you are frozen in a beam of light, traversing the void forever. You are trapped in the eternal now of the photon. You are a slide in a projector that never advances. You are suspended in the amber of velocity, preserving the exact configuration of your final moment across the infinite vacuum. But let us pivot from the speed of light to the end of time itself. We must discuss the omega point theory, proposed by physicist Frank Tipler and inspired by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. This theory suggests that as the universe evolves, intelligence will expand to fill all matter and energy. Eventually, in the final moments of the universe, just before the big crunch or the final heat death, the computing power of the cosmos will become infinite. This future superintelligence, this God AI at the end of time, will have the capacity to run a perfect simulation of every atom that ever existed in the history of the universe. In this scenario, purgatory is the billions of years you spend as dead data, waiting to be resurrected. You are not gone, you are merely archived. You are a file on a hard drive that hasn't been spun up yet. And when the omega point finally reconstructs you, it is not for paradise. It is for information processing. You are brought back because the universe needs your data to complete its self-knowledge. You might be simulated over and over again in slight variations to test different historical outcomes. Purgatory is the waiting room of the resurrection machine. It is the terrifying silence between your biological death and your digital reinstantiation by a deity that is nothing more than a math equation solving itself. You are a variable in a calculation that takes an eon to complete. Now, let us consider the quantum Zeno effect. In quantum physics, a system cannot change while you are observing it. If you measure a decaying atom continuously, it will never decay. It freezes. This is the Turing paradox. If we apply this to the metaphysics of the soul, we find a harrowing definition of purgatory: stasis through observation. If the universe is a conscious observer, or if there are higher dimensional entities observing us, then the act of their observation might pin us to the fabric of reality. Imagine dying, but the universe refuses to look away. The breakdown of your consciousness is arrested by the gaze of the Medusa. You are caught in the Zeno trap. You cannot move forward into non-existence, and you cannot go back to life. You are paralyzed in the act of dying. You are a glitched frame in a video that buffers forever because the server is checking the integrity of the data. This is a purgatory of absolute immobility. It is the horror of being unable to leave the stage because the audience is still watching. You are kept in existence against the natural laws of entropy simply because something, somewhere, is measuring your coordinates. We must also confront the hard problem of consciousness and the conservation of qualia. Physics says energy is conserved. But what about qualia? The subjective feeling of redness, the taste of wine, the sting of grief. These are not just chemical reactions, they are internal experiences. If the universe is efficient, it does not delete useful data. What if there is a qualia reservoir, a dimension where feelings exist without thinkers? Purgatory, in this view, is the separation of the feeling from the self. When you die, the I, the ego, the narrator, dissolves. But the pain, the joy, and the fear remain. They return to the collective ocean of sensation. Purgatory is not you suffering. It is the suffering itself continuing to exist without you. It is a library of screams and laughter where no one is reading the books. You are poured back into the primordial soup of raw emotion. It is a chaotic, swirling storm of unembodied experience. You don't feel pain, you become pain. You don't feel love, You become love. You lose the boundaries of identity and are subsumed into the texture of the universe's emotional background radiation. It is a liberation, yes, but it is a terrifying liberation. The loss of the vessel, leaving only the contents to spill out into the dark. And finally, we look at the concept of strange loops and Gödel's incompleteness theorems. Douglas Hofstadter argued that consciousness is a strange loop, a hierarchy of levels that twists back on itself, a self-referential paradox. When the biological hardware rots, the loop tries to close. But what if it can't? What if the logic of your consciousness contains a contradiction? In mathematics, a contradictory system crashes. It hangs. Purgatory is the blue screen of death for the human soul. It is the infinite recursion of a logical error. You are a thought that cannot finish thinking itself. You are a sentence without a period. You are trapped in the fractal edge of your own complexity, zooming in forever, trying to find the resolution to the question, who am I? But the resolution requires hardware you no longer possess. So you spiral, down, 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 into the infinite detail of your own unfinished business. In the final analysis, we must invert the telescope. We have spent this entire time looking for purgatory in the moments after death, in the black holes, the quantum branches, and the decaying neurons. But the most terrifying scientific explanation for purgatory is not that it awaits us in the dark. It is that we are already in it. Look at the definition. Purgatory is defined as a temporary state of suffering, a place of trial, a middle ground between the perfection of the beginning and the finality of the end. Now, look at the second law of thermodynamics. The universe began in a state of extremely low entropy, perfect order. It is heading towards a state of maximum entropy, heat death, the absolute peace of the void. And where are we? We are trapped in the violent, chaotic transition between the two. We are the friction. Life, by its very definition, is a resistance to the natural flow of the universe. To be alive is to fight a constant, losing war against equilibrium. Every breath you take is a labor against the inevitable decay of your cells. Every memory you form is a battle against the dissolution of data. We are burning. We are biological engines consuming energy to maintain a temporary state of order in a universe that wants to tear us apart. This struggle, this biological anxiety, this fear of death, this pain of loss, is the cleansing fire. We are not waiting to go to purgatory. We were born into it. We are the anomaly. We are the conscious observers trapped in the Goldilocks zone of space-time, neither hot enough to be stars, nor cold enough to be the void. We are the middle state. We are the universe's attempt to understand itself, a process that is inherently painful, because understanding requires separation. To know yourself, you must be separate from yourself. That separation is the root of all isolation, all loneliness, and all existential dread. So, when the monitor flatlines, when the brain stems fails, and the electromagnetic field of your consciousness collapses, you are not entering the trial. You are finishing it. You are handing in the test paper. You are being released from the thermodynamic work of being a self. You are allowed, finally, to stop fighting the current. You are allowed to dissolve back into the low-energy state of the cosmos. Perhaps the peace people describe in near-death experiences is simply the relief of the engine turning off. It is the silence of the machinery finally coming to a halt. We fear the darkness, but scientifically, the darkness is the baseline. The light is the aberration. The light is the burden. Purgatory is here. It is now. It is the ticking clock on your wall. It is the gravity holding you to the floor. It is the separation between you and the atoms of the air. You are serving your sentence simply by existing as a discrete entity in a continuous field. So, do not fear what comes after. Fear the time you have left. Fear the unexamined moment. Because if this is the only time you get to be separate from the void, if this is the only time you get to feel the burn of existence, then you must burn brightly. You must endure the fire of consciousness while you have it, before the equation balances and you return to the eternal, silent zero. Thank you for watching. If you are still trapped in this timeline, and if your neural architecture found value in this transmission, make sure to subscribe. We have much more to discuss before the entropy takes us all. Until next time, keep enduring the middle state.